All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. Bear with me just a moment as I get the camera set up, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Smith. I am the Wellness Program Administrator with Employee Development and Wellness Services at Georgia State University. By trade, I am a registered dietitian, so my job is to deal with all things food and nutrition, and I'm really excited to be cooking with everyone today. So a couple kind of ground rules before we get started. We are making use of the WebEx platform today, which comes with a couple nice features. The first is you may notice that we are recording this session. So we record it so that we can send you a copy later, so that if you want to cook alongside me and watch the video, you'll have that as an option. Or if there's a colleague who may not have been able to attend today, you can pass the video along to them. We're also going to be sending a copy of the recipe and the nutrition information with that recording, so you'll have everything you need to make the recipe you see today. Additionally, WebEx has some chat feature availability that we're going to make use of. On the right side of your screen, you should see a chat dialog box. Throughout the course of the presentation, if you've got questions, comments, tips for me or other people in the audience, we'd love to hear them. So go ahead and use that chat feature. At the end of the presentation, we'll be sure to go through what everyone said, read it aloud, and then have a little bit of a discussion about it. So you can use that chat feature to type in any comments or questions, and we'll make sure to check them at the end of the presentation. So to get started today, we are going to be making kale and chickpea bowls with creamy avocado dressing. This is a really, really healthy recipe, and it's pretty easy too, which is nice. In total, it'll take you about 20 minutes to make the whole thing. It's not too involved. There's a little bit of prep that you'll see that goes into some of the vegetables and getting all that ready. But when all said and done, you have a really healthy meal that's going to make 5 servings as well. So this is great for spacing out, doing some meal prep as we're going back into the office. It's great to have a healthy lunch that we can bring in with us. So this is perfect for that. So let's go ahead and cover some of the ingredients that are going to be involved. And the first thing I want to draw attention to is I have actually pre-cooked some quinoa. So we're using quinoa as our healthy whole grain option. It's going to add some carbohydrates to this, but they're very healthy ones that are packed with vitamins and minerals as well as dietary fiber. All these things together make it a healthy grain choice. I'm making use of tricolor quinoa. Hopefully you can make that out there. This is just Kroger brand. You can really get any color quinoa you want. This just happens to be a blend of 3 different colors. Basically, whenever you're making quinoa, you'll want to follow the package directions, but most of them are pretty similar. We're using half a cup of dried quinoa with 1 cup of water. We bring that to a boil, then reduce it to a simmer and cover and cook for about 15 minutes. As I mentioned, I've gone ahead and pre-cooked that quinoa, so we'll be good to go and won't have to worry about that, and we'll incorporate that into the recipe later. But for now, let's get started with the main things we're going to be cooking. We're going to be making use of chickpeas as our plant-based protein for this recipe. So I have taken 2 cans of chickpeas or garbanzo beans and rinsed and drained them and put them in this bowl here. So those are rinsed and drained, so they are good to go. We're going to be cooking those on a large skillet here in just a moment. But we'll be cooking them with some other ingredients, one of which is going to be carrots. So we're going to want about 2 cups of chopped carrots. So I've rinsed these and I've gone ahead and peeled them to get off any blemishes, any dirt, things like that. So they're nice and clean, and we can go ahead and begin cutting. Now for chopping these, nothing too particular. I'm just going to be going right along the carrot and chopping them into pieces. My goal is to be safe while doing it. So I'm going to use, you've probably seen this little claw kind of grip before, which allows us to rest our fingers on something to prevent it from rolling around and keep it stable. But if our knife gets a little too close to our hand, rather than taking off a fingertip, we might just skin our knuckles a little bit. Ideally, we don't do either of those, but it's much safer than the alternative. So I've got that little claw grip here, kind of holding it down, and I'm just going to chop through the carrot. Now, as we're chopping these, the size that we're looking to get is really going to, it's going to vary. We want it to be thin so that it will cook evenly. So as you're cutting it and you're comparing the slices to one another, you want them to be about the same width so that when we're cooking it on the skillet, we're not going to have one piece that's super tender and another piece that isn't done yet. And what you can do is after you cut through one of the carrots, you may go back and compare. Like I can see this guy down here is pretty small, but at the top I had a thicker piece. Now, if you have a piece that's really thick that you're worried about not cooking through evenly, what I would recommend doing is rather than trying to make this tiny little cut along the edge there, I would just turn it sideways and cut this way. It's much safer and a lot easier to get that cut to happen without you putting anything at risk, because we want to be safe while we're cooking. So 2 cups of chopped carrots is going to be about 3 carrots. It'll depend on the size. So we'll just go ahead and continue cutting these. Now, carrots are very, very healthy for us. That beautiful bright orange color lets us know that they are rich in beta carotene, which is a precursor, or it's the fancy word to say that our body is able to use that to make a vitamin, and we end up making vitamin A with it. And I think a lot of us have probably heard about vitamin A in carrots and how it can help with things like vision. And while it doesn't actually make our vision better when we eat carrots, having them helps prevent vitamin deficiencies that could cause some vision issues. So it's great to have that. Vitamin A is also important for healthy skin and healthy cells in a lot of places in our body. So it's just all around a really excellent nutrient. And you can notice this in other vegetables too. Typically vegetables with that bright orange or red color, it's from the beta carotene or the vitamin A that's inside of them. So you can kind of be tipped off as to what the nutrition content is. So that's about 2 cups of chopped carrots. I have pre-chopped a yellow onion. We only needed 1/4 cup, so just a small amount here. If you're not a fan of onions, this is something you can leave out, but I think the aromatics add a nice flavor boost to the chickpeas and the carrots that you're going to cook together. So in a large skillet over here, and really we're aiming for the biggest one you have. If you have one that has a lid to go with it, that's even better, but we'll talk about what to do if you don't. So I've got a large skillet over here. I'm going to bend down and set this, well, first we're going to add some oil. So this is 1½ tablespoons of canola oil. So we're just going to put that on the skillet, and we're going to put that over a medium-high heat. Bear with me here. Okay, so we're going to heat up that oil, 1½ tablespoons of canola oil. You're welcome to use any vegetable or cooking oil that you like. Canola is a heart-healthy oil. Some other options might include doing things like soybean oil, safflower oil, avocado oil, things like that. We'll actually be making use of another oil later in the recipe for our dressing, which is extra virgin olive oil. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But for now, we're just using 1½ tablespoons of canola. So the oil's heating up. What we're going to do is we are going to take our 2 cans of chickpeas that we've rinsed and drained, and we're just going to put them directly on top of the skillet. We're going to add in our 1/4 cup of yellow onions, and then our 2 cups of the carrots that we chopped up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a spoon, or you can use a spatula, and I'm going to stir it a little bit. My goal is to just try to get everything onto an even level. That way it has its best chance of cooking evenly. If things are stacked on top of each other, they may not have equal access to heat, and we want everything to be nicely done. Okay, so I've spread that out to a bit of an even layer. I'm actually going to make use of this little kind of mesh lid. What this is nice for is if you have something like chickpeas that when they cook, sometimes they can pop a little bit and they may jump up out of your pan. If you've got a lid, you can use that as well, but this allows the steam to escape while also preventing those chickpeas from going on a little bit of a ride. So I'm just going to set that on top. If you don't have one of those, it's totally okay. You'll be all right if you cook these. So we're going to cook those for 6 minutes. We're looking for the chickpeas to start to brown a little bit. That's a good indication that they've been in there long enough. So 6 minutes over that medium-high heat. Now, if you've got a gas stove like I do, things may cook pretty quickly. If you're using an electric stove, you may need a couple extra minutes to get those chickpeas to brown like we want them to. So with that going over here, let's talk about the next ingredient we'll be adding. The next thing we're going to add is kale. We're going to need 4 cups of kale. Now you can, if you prefer, you can buy the kale in the bunches where you have the really big leaves. You can rinse those. You can chop them into small pieces like you're seeing here. But if you want to save time, most grocery stores are also going to have pre-bagged kale that's already chopped into these nice little pieces. It's pre-washed as well. So that's a good way if you're looking to make the meal a little easier on yourself. It's a bit more expensive to buy the pre-bagged kale, but you get some of that time back, which is nice. So kale is incredibly healthy. It is packed with vitamin A, with vitamin C, and with vitamin K. So it's really, really rich in a lot of vitamins and minerals. People call it a superfood, and it really is one when we look at that nutrition profile. So it's a great leafy green to add into salads, to sandwiches, to wraps. And we're going to be cooking it today with the chickpeas and carrots for a really nice blend of flavors, and it will be the base of our salad. So 4 cups, again, is the amount we'll be using, and we'll add that to that in just a minute. The other green that we'll be making use of today is going to be some fresh parsley. Now, we're not going to cook the parsley. The parsley is going to get added in after all the cooking is done, but we can go ahead and prepare it. So I have rinsed this already and washed it off. And what we want are the leaves up here at the top. We're not really interested in the stems. They're a little tough and fibrous. You can eat them, it won't hurt you, but most people don't like to. So we're going to actually start by cutting the stems off, and we're going to discard those and set them over to the side. Now with the parsley, I mentioned our goal is to get those leaves. It's okay if we have a couple pieces of the stem here and there. If you're really particular, you can separate the leaves from the stem. I'm not really going to be that picky today because a little bit of stem doesn't bother me. So my goal is now to kind of pack this together. You may try to roll it into sort of a cigar shape as we're rolling it like that. And that will give us a nice little surface to cut with the knife as we go through. Again, I'm making that claw grip to protect my fingertips, and I'm going to just run the knife through it. And there's not really a science to this. After you've cut through once, what I usually like to do is just take it, turn it a little bit, pack it back together, and run that knife through once more. My goal is to not have super large pieces of parsley that I bite into. I just want some little pieces here and there to add some flavor. Okay, that's looking good. I'm just going to set that to the side of the cutting board for now, because we're going to come back to that a little bit later in the recipe. So we've had this cooking for a few minutes now, so it's about time to add the kale. Now, if you have a lid that will fit your large skillet, when you add the kale, go ahead and put the lid on top of it. The reason for that is the lid's going to prevent the steam from escaping, which will allow the kale to cook a little bit faster. It'll trap some of that heat in and everything will speed up. If you don't have a lid, that's all right. You can make do without one. Simply put the kale on top and cook it as you normally would. It may take a little longer since some of the heat is escaping to cook everything through, but we'll keep an eye on it and talk about what to look for visually. So I'm going to remove my little mesh lid here. And I'm just going to add the 4 cups of kale on top of it. Now, while you're putting this on, 4 cups is a lot of volume when we're looking at greens. So you're going to have this tower pouring out of your skillet like you can see here. And what I'm going to do is take this again and once again try to distribute those layers so that everything is able to cook as evenly as possible. So just kind of pushing the kale down a little bit, giving it a little space. And I'm actually going to put this back on for now to serve as my sort of lid. And that kale will condense significantly and reduce in volume as we cook it. We're not trying to shrivel it up all the way. What we're going to do is cook this for about 2 minutes. What I'm looking for visually is that the kale has started to wilt. It'll get a really bright green color. If you've ever cooked broccoli before, once you start cooking it, about halfway through, it'll get really vibrant and bright green. We want to stop there with the kale when we see that color. If you've cooked something like broccoli as well, after you cook for too long, it may start to get brown. It loses some of that bright green. We don't want to get there with the kale. We're not trying to make it crispy. We just want it to be bright, bright green. So we'll keep an eye on that, give it about 2 minutes to cook, and then we'll turn off the heat and remove it and add some of these other ingredients. But while we're waiting on that last minute, we are going to be making a dressing. And the dressing is going to use an avocado as its base. So avocados are an incredibly heart-healthy fat. When I say heart-healthy fat, what we're looking for are fats that are low in saturated fat. Saturated fat is linked to some issues with cholesterol and heart disease, so we want to limit our saturated fat in the diet. Instead, we want to try to get more heart-healthy fats, which are our unsaturated fats. Avocados are often advertised as being very heart-healthy because they are high in unsaturated and low in saturated fat. So lots of the good, not very much of the bad. So it's a great, great item to use when we're making all sorts of different dishes. So I'm peeking at the kale over here. Oh yeah, it's starting to get that really, really bright green color that we want. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat here. And we'll just let that sit for a moment. I'm going to let it cool for just a bit before we add in our other ingredients. So let's continue talking about what's going into this dressing. We're going to have half of an avocado for our heart-healthy fats. In terms of other flavor items, we're actually going to be making use of something called tahini. Some of you may have heard of tahini before. Essentially what it is if you're familiar with sesame seeds, this is like peanut butter is, it's a nut butter made from peanuts. Tahini is kind of like the peanut butter version of sesame seeds, if that makes sense. So we're grounding up the sesame seeds. We're kind of making them into a paste or a nut butter. It's just brown in color. It kind of looks like peanut butter. You can find it usually if you have like a health food section of your grocery store, you might find it there. Often it's in the baking aisle. It may take a little bit of looking around to find it. I'll show you a little closer view if the light will focus on that of what this one looks like. Again, it's called tahini, and it's just made from ground sesame seeds. Nutritionally, it's very similar to peanut butter as well. It has a good bit of protein in it and a good bit of fat as well. So it's going to add a nice creaminess and a good bit of flavor to the dressing that we're making. But before we jump into the dressing, I'm going to move back over here. This has been removed from the heat. It's starting to cool down a little bit. We're going to want a large bowl to store all that in because there's quite a lot of it. So I'm going to reach over here and just make use of this dish. Ideally, the bowl that you put it in, you'll be able to seal with a lid or something like that because we are going to want to store it in the fridge when we have our leftovers. So I'm just going to the best of my ability, try to make not too much of a mess, move this over into the bowl here. And we're moving it into the bowl because we're going to combine it with the parsley, the quinoa, and a little bit of seasoning. Because right now we have some oil, we've got onions, carrots, chickpeas, and kale, which are all delicious, but we can do a little bit to bump up that flavor. Right. And when you cook, you may have some onions that are stuck to the bottom of the pan. You can scrape those off and get them in. They're going to be nice and tasty. And this this actually smells great already. Onions being an aromatic add a lot of flavor and just that aroma to the kitchen. So even without adding the dressing or the seasoning, this still smells pretty good. So let's take our quinoa. I mentioned that we made half a cup of dry quinoa with 1 cup of water, which ends up about tripling in volume. So we've got a good bit of quinoa here. We will just scoop that all in. And if you haven't had quinoa before, I didn't talk about it too much. I mentioned it was a whole grain. It's, I really, really like it. It has a sort of nutty flavor to it. It's a bit hard to describe. Texturally, it's somewhat similar to brown rice, but it's a bit of a different experience. I think brown rice might be the easiest comparison to make, but if you haven't had it, I encourage you to try it. It's very, very healthy, and it works great in a lot of these salad dishes. So we've added the quinoa in. I'm going to actually go ahead and just put that parsley on top that we chopped up earlier. That beautiful bright green color. And then we're going to add half a teaspoon of black pepper and half a teaspoon of table salt. And then using salad tongs or a spoon or anything like that, actually, if you've got a lid, you could put the lid on and just shake it all together. We're going to stir this around. We want the black pepper and the salt to just mix in with the quinoa, to mix in directly with that salad and all those chickpeas. Okay. I'm making a mess here, but I always do that when I cook. That's part of the process. And you can kind of take a look at what we're looking at here. We've got all these beautiful colors from the oranges and the carrots to the greens of the parsley and the kale, mixing in with those healthy carbohydrates from the chickpeas and the quinoa. So this is really wholesome right now. A lot of good happening here. But let's make that dressing because that's going to take it to the next level and give this a lot more flavor. So let me set this actually over to the side here. In order to make the dressing, we are going to be making use of a food processor. This is just a small one. They're pretty affordable if you don't have one. A small size one like this won't run you too much. If you don't have a food processor, you can use a blender as well. Food processors tend to be a little better in the way that their blades are set up to reach the type of stuff that we're going to be making. But if you've got a small blender or one of the NutriBullets at home, that will work well for this too. So I mentioned some of our dressing ingredients. the first of which is an avocado. So let's go ahead and get this set up. When you're selecting one at the grocery store, you want to be able to press it and it should yield to firm pressure, meaning that when you press into it with a little bit of pressure, you can feel it giving a little bit. You don't want it to be too mushy. You don't want it to be rock hard either. Learning to pick an avocado that's ripe is a bit of an art. You can always buy one a couple days in advance and give it time to ripen. So what we're going to do is cut down the middle of this. You can see this stem here at the top, and I'm going to line my knife up with that and just cut into it. Now, as I cut in, if you've never worked with an avocado before, you're going to hit the pit of it or the core of it. This is where my knife naturally stops. Do not force past that. You're not going to be able to cut through the middle of that safely. So what I'm going to do is rotate the avocado a little bit and continue to press my knife down until I meet that resistance. And I'm just going to rotate all the way around, and eventually it'll connect back to where I cut. And if your avocado is ripe, you should be able to gently pull apart, and just like that, you've got your avocado set up. You will remove that pit piece here. We're not going to put that into anything that's not an edible part of the avocado. We only need half for this recipe, so we've got this nice ripe avocado piece here. And what I'm going to do is, using a spoon, I'm just going to scoop this out and put it into the food processor. So you can slide that spoon right beneath the skin. You want to get as much of that avocado as you can, and you can just kind of pry it out just like that. So you've got your empty avocado skin. Now, after you do that, if you notice there are big pieces of avocado in there, avocados are delicious, and I don't want to waste them, so I'm going to go back and scoop out those extra pieces and make sure that they make it all the way into the dressing. Okay, so we've got our avocado in the food processor. Let's go ahead and add those other ingredients that I talked about. We're going to add 1 tablespoon of tahini, which again is that sesame seed paste or sesame seed butter. It's very similar to peanut butter. Now, if you have some of this already and you've had it for a while, because I cooked with it a couple months ago, if you've had it for a while, you may need to stir because the oil will separate a little bit. So you can stir it around inside, scoop up your tablespoon, and then go ahead and add that into the dressing there. And if it sticks to the spoon, you can always just use another one to pry it out. It is pretty sticky because of the oil and just kind of the nature of it. So we've got a tablespoon of that. We're going to be adding, for seasoning, just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. All right. Then we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. So turmeric is this bright yellowy orange one. It's going to give us a lot of color as well as a good bit of flavor. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Now, what I mentioned earlier was that we're specifically using extra virgin olive oil for this, but we didn't cook with that. The reason is that extra virgin olive oil is delicious and great for things like salad dressings. It's really good for applications like that. Unfortunately, extra virgin olive oil is not that great for cooking. It doesn't stand up to high heat particularly well. So that's why I preferred to use something like canola oil when we were cooking everything else. But for dressings, extra virgin is excellent. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of lemon juice here. You are welcome to use fresh lemon juice, but I'm going to be just using the bottled kind. That's going to give us a little bit of acid, a little bit of tang whenever we're eating the dressing. We're going to use 1 tablespoon of water. Now with the water is to thin the dressing out somewhat. If your blender or food processor is having trouble getting it down, it's a little too thick, you can always add more water. I would add about 1/2 tablespoon at a time to thin it out. And then the last ingredient is going to be minced garlic. You're welcome to use fresh, but I always like to use minced because I can keep it in the refrigerator and always have it on hand. I'm going to use 1/2 teaspoon of minced garlic, though if you prefer to use fresh, go ahead and use a full clove here. Okay, so those are our salad dressing ingredients. I'm going to push that avocado down in a little more. And using your food processor or your blender, go ahead and just pulse that. We want to get it to a smooth, creamy consistency. It's salad dressing after all, so it'll turn bright green and we'll know that we've gotten there when everything looks even and you don't see any chunks or pieces of things. So bear with me while I run this. All right. So hopefully the camera will be able to pick up on that. It is this beautiful bright green color. You may have seen it in the photo before we got started of the recipe. You'll be able to see it on the recipe card where there's a nice balanced photo that'll show all those colors. But this smells so good. You can smell the lemon juice and the avocado working together very nicely. So this is our dressing for the salad. So we've got the big chickpea bowls here with the kale, the carrots, and the onion. Now, at this point, you've got a bit of a choice to make. You can serve this right here and now, putting the dressing on top of it, and it's all mixed together. But what I would recommend is actually storing these in separate containers. I would put the chickpea bowls in one bowl, and then go ahead and put the dressing in a separate airtight container. And I would let it chill in the refrigerator for about 2 hours. The reason I say that is I've made this recipe before, and right now all these ingredients are hot. And that works. If you have a cool dressing on top of the hot dish, it can be a nice kind of sensation balance there. But I have found that this recipe is best served cold. When you refrigerate this, the flavors marinate a bit more. I like what happens to the dressing. So I would actually recommend chilling it for about 2 hours before enjoying it. For the leftovers, put them in those airtight containers. You've got 3 to 4 days in the refrigerator before it would start to go bad. So after about the 4th day, then we kind of get into that food safety territory that we don't want to be in. So this is a great recipe to prep on a Sunday and have lunch for work set up for Monday through Thursday. It's really, really delicious. You saw it was fairly simple to make, nothing too complicated. And nutritionally, it is so healthy. I mentioned it makes 5 servings, and each serving is about 400 calories and has about 15 grams of protein in it, coming from the chickpeas and the quinoa. So it's a plant-based source of protein, really, really excellent source of fiber, all these vitamins and minerals, and we've got these heart-healthy fats here in the dressing. And let me see what our time looks like. Okay, we're a little over. I'm going to plate this and kind of show you what it looks like. Let me grab a bowl, just so you can get a nicer visual for all the colors working together. And I see we have some questions and comments in the chat, so I'm going to turn to those in just a moment after I've gotten this plated to show you. Let's just get a bit of this dressing. Okay. Now, hopefully you're able to see that on the camera. I'm not sure how color balanced everything is, but it looks really beautiful with all the different shades of green from the kale, the parsley, and the dressing, the bright orange carrots, and then our quinoa and chickpeas shining through. So let's turn our attention over here. I'm going to check out the chat feature, see if people have questions or comments. Oh, okay. Here's someone who mentioned about the information of not cooking with extra virgin olive oil. Yeah, that actually catches a lot of people off guard. Most of us just think of olive oil as being healthy, which it is. So we want to cook with it. We want to make dressing with it. We want to do everything with it. And if it's extra virgin, so good in salad dressings. It's good for some people like to dip bread in it and things like that. But yeah, if we are cooking on a stovetop at really any sort of high heat situation, it'll start to smoke. Different oils have smoke points. And if they're smoking, that lets you know that you're cooking at a higher temperature than that oil is really made to withstand. So canola oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, there are a number of different vegetable-based oils that have a higher smoke point and are better for stovetop cooking or high heat cooking. But when it comes to dressings, you really can't beat extra virgin olive oil. So yeah, always happy to kind of pass that info along. I remember learning about it a couple of years ago and really being surprised because I, growing up had used it a little differently as well. So good information. I see a couple comments of people talking about how it looks. Yeah, it's really delicious. I'm sure you'll enjoy it if you try to make it at home. Like I mentioned, I really like to eat it cold. There's something about it whenever you've chilled it and refrigerated it that I think really brings out the flavors in it. Okay, I see another comment here asking about the carbohydrate count and if it might be friendly for someone who is diabetic or counting carbs. So, of course, if you are diabetic or you have a condition like that, it's always good to check with your healthcare provider and your team about what will fit into your lifestyle. That said, the carbohydrate amount in this is 49 grams in a serving, which is a very reasonable amount. And for most people, even if you are counting carbs or diabetic, that is a very diabetic-friendly carbohydrate amount. So it's a healthy recipe. There are carbs in it, but they're coming from healthy sources like our vegetables, our chickpeas, our quinoa. So when we pick these healthy options for our carbohydrates, we're fueling our bodies with high quality nutrients that help us be healthy. So it is definitely, it's a heart healthy recipe. It's diabetic friendly. It's got a good source of protein in it, just all around nutritious and great. So we'll send out that copy of the recipe with the more detailed nutrition information if you want to take a look at it, see how it might fit into your personal lifestyle. We'll also be sending a copy of the recording, and there'll be a short survey that'll come with that email where you can just let us know what you thought of today's session. If you've got ideas for ways we can improve it, other recipes you want to see, I would love to see them. I love when people share recipes with me because we're always looking for new things to demonstrate and cook in front of people. And I want to make sure I'm not missing anything else. All right, I think I've caught all the questions in the chat. Of course, if you have any additional questions that I couldn't cover today, you can always email us. Our email for our office is edws@gsu.edu. We do a wide variety of wellness programming from nutrition to physical activity, stress management and mental health, financial well-being, all sorts of good stuff. And if you want to see more sessions like this or see what else we have to offer, you can get on our mailing list. Each week we send out an email that lets people know all the different events we'll be doing in a week. Tomorrow, for example, Friday at 12 p.m., we're going to be doing guided meditation and yoga. It's a really great session, good way to wrap up the week. So that'll be from 12 to 1:30. You're welcome to join for just part of it or stay for the whole thing if you prefer. And we'll be conducting that virtually. So if you want to get on our email list, email us at edws@gsu.edu, and we can make sure that you get all those messages. If you're from another institution, we encourage you to join that emailing list as well. We've got lots of folks from our USG family who like to attend our sessions, and we always want to welcome them too. So with that being said, I think I covered all the questions. I hope everyone has a great and healthy rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.